On this edition of Southern Newsweek, developers of Ladies Mile near Queenstown are disappointed with a recent council decision. Neither a false start nor inclement weather could dampen spirits in the inaugural Lake Hayes run. And we look at how Anzac Day 2019 was remembered across the south. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Daryl Baser. The backers of two special housing areas proposed for Queenstown's Ladies Mile say they're devastated to have been rejected. Queenstown Lakes District Councillors voted to decline the Glen Panel Flints Park and Laurel Hills proposals at a recent council meeting. All eyes on the QLDC. A packed public gallery watched Queenstown Lakes District Councillors turn down an application to build more than 150 homes at Laurel Hill and Flints Park. While he agrees with the decision, Shotover Country Community Association Chairman Clark Perry says it's a tough call for councillors.
It's difficult for the councillors. They're in a really tough position. I think they've made the right decisions, considering what's in front of them and the growth pains that we're experiencing in the community. I think it's right for them to take a step back and retain a significantly greater measure of control over the development of the Ladies Mile.
Council was unanimous in turning down the 156-home Laurel Hills special housing area, but the vote on two proposed areas, which would provide 400 houses, was split, but still turned down, with 4 in favour and 6 against. Frankton resident Kevin Conahan believes the New Zealand Transport Agency was under pressure from the previous government and built a bridge in the wrong place.
I think that they were under some pressure from the last government to get that new bridge built. When they did, I think it would have been better tested. They could have done more to look at whether it was in the right place.
Flints Park backer Lindsay Top says the council has missed a great opportunity to provide much needed affordable housing in the area, and it isn't taking advantage of the government's $24 million housing infrastructure fund to build new infrastructure along Ladies Mile. Queenstown Mayor Jim Bolt told developers their proposals are fair and reasonable, but says the New Zealand Transport Agency has dropped the ball completely in addressing the area's traffic issues.
And I'm just really uncomfortable with throwing more and more traffic onto that road until we have a concrete plan in front of us from NZTA which addresses crossing the Shotover River both by motor car, motor vehicle and by active transport. We don't have that at the present time and I'm thoroughly disappointed.
The 600-home Coneburn development near Hanley's Farm has been approved. In Queenstown, the South Today. Dark clouds, persistent rain and a false start didn't slow the pace of athletes competing in the inaugural lap of Lake Hayes race near Queenstown recently. Around 40 runners took part in the 8-kilometre loop, where winners smashed the officials' predictions of how long it would take them to finish the cross-country course.
They may have got off to a false start, but there was every reason to impress in the inaugural lap of Lake Hayes race near Queenstown over the long weekend. New Zealand running royalty watching on in the form of Rod Dixon and Lorraine Moller, who just happened to be in town for the weekend. Dixon, a big believer in community events.
It's a wee bit like the farmers market. It's about local farmers, local people, local shoppers, local produce. And so we've got to get back to this. This is the core of the country, is back to community.
The event is the brainchild of Queenstown Athletics President and Wakatipu High School coach Neville Britton.
Some of the high school kids that I coach at the school do this as a bit of a time trial training run, and on Strava, which is a web-based app, they noticed that they held the current fastest all-time record around here, and some of the other runners that run it are pretty elite. So we decided, well, we need to have an event to recognise the actual record.
From there, the race was born with around 40 runners taking part in the 8-kilometre loop. But Britton says while it attracted some of the best athletes in the region, it's also about trying to combat an increasingly inactive population.
You know, we're getting lazy. You know, we're not chopping wood anymore. You know, we're not running to catch buses. You know, and the sport is dying, and we're getting more people becoming sports experts on couches and not participating.
A sentiment echoed by Dixon, who says holding running events at a local level encourages children to be active and healthy.
We've got together with people that I haven't seen for 20, 30 years, and we've met down here to come together because we're all invested in helping the next generation be the best that they can be.
For the record, Dunedin's Margie Campbell took out the Women's Open Trophy with a time of 29 minutes and 16 seconds, while Cromwell's Daniel Belchin won the Open Men's title with a tidy 25 minutes 18. And with the competition in its first year, winners now hold the official records. In Queenstown, the South Today.
It was the first of its kind in Dunedin. A brazen, armed hold-up by a gunman who made off with Cadbury's entire weekly payroll worth £53,000. It's around 40 years since the heist, and the police file remains open. Otago Daily Times reporter Chris Morris spoke with one of the workers who was there at the time.
Well, 40 years ago, it takes a bit to remember, but I do remember that it was the day after my birthday, and one of the staff, Runa Chesney, was getting morning tea, which I was apparently shouting for the staff. So I remember that, and Runa remembers the incident quite vividly because she went out in the car to get the morning tea, and she'd parked just across the road there by the entranceway, and she thought when she came back, I'll be lucky to get the same park. And there was a car on the driveway, the entranceway, and she thought, well, I'll go up next to that and reverse back in. And she happened to look into the car, and this guy was sitting there with a sort of balaclava down around his neck, and she said he had a very, very white face. He looked scared stiff, and she didn't give it too much thought. She said, oh, perhaps he's not too well, and reversed back into the car park, and I guess got my morning tea out and went up to the office. And in those days, the head office was in Castle Street, 30 Castle Street, and you went upstairs to the reception. So she went up there, and she said that she was desperate to go to the toilet, so she went away into the toilet. And when she actually got back, the whole incident was over. The security chap that was had the payroll, there's normally two of them, but on this day there was only one, and he hopped out of the car and was only about the second step up the stairs to reception when he was accosted and was relieved of the payroll, which was in excess of £50,000, which in 1979 obviously was a very sizable sum of money. Never found the brown suitcase I was talking about. It was found on the beach at Meraki, and it was smouldering. He had obviously taken the cash out and lit fire to the suitcase, and that was the remains of it. There was many theories as to what happened. There were some theories that it was an inside job, but I'm certain that wasn't the case. There's other theories that the guy got the money and it went to Australia and ended up in the drug trade, which I guess by today's standards was in its earlier stages, but that to me makes quite a bit of sense. I think it could have happened. Who knows?
Still to come on Southern Newsweek, we look at a helicopter crash in the Southern Ocean which had a happy ending, and catch up with the organisers of a recent upcycled clothing workshop. We'll see you after the break. No mai anō, welcome back. Investigators made their way to Invercargill to interview the three men who survived a helicopter crash in the Southern Ocean. The interviews begin an investigation which may include an attempt to raise the helicopter from the sea.
Touching down in Invercargill after an ordeal which saw three colleagues survive a helicopter crash in the Southern Ocean. They were found alive and standing on a beach in the sub-Antarctic islands more than 12 hours after the crash most feared would yield no survivors.
Look, I think this here was unbelievable. I think you go to one of the furthest places that we go to in New Zealand. Certainly the furthest south in New Zealand that helicopters actually operate. It's a very remote place, and we've always said, if anything ever goes wrong, we can only ever get ourselves out of trouble.
That's clearly what they did, standing on the windswept shore in their orange immersion suits yesterday morning with Southern Lakes Helicopters pilot Andrew Hefford, winch operator Lester Stevens and St John paramedic John Lambeth.
Temperatures are low, they actually were out on shore, but obviously no matches or anything to light a fire. They couldn't rave enough about how good the immersion suits were.
The crew were racing south on a routine medical evacuation from a fishing vessel when their helicopter crashed in the sea near the Auckland Islands for reasons as yet unknown. Communication was lost with the helicopter at around 7:40 on Monday night, but they were spotted shortly before noon yesterday to everyone's elation.
Just incredible sort of roar went up when the RCC centre rang to say that Richard's just found them, so absolutely elated.
But he says the lack of communication with the helicopter in the moments before the crash remains a mystery.
Everything was just as normal. So for that last 2 minutes, we agonised over why that had happened and trying to simulate it and talk it through.
Matheson says he might owe his good mate Lester a beer, as he was supposed to be on yesterday's medevac mission. But due to a funeral, he swapped places at the last minute. In Invercargill, the South Today.
Southern environmentalist group Extinction Rebellion Queenstown Lakes made its mark in Wanaka recently. The group used a popular natural landmark in an effort to spread its message across the globe.
Dozens of photographers gathering on the Lake Wanaka foreshore this morning to take pictures of the iconic tree nestled in the water. It's a daily occurrence in the resort town, but today the onlookers were struck with a slightly altered landscape. The large sign reading "There is no Planet B" had been placed in the early hours of this morning by local environmentalist group Extinction Rebellion Queenstown Lakes.
We think that highlighting the disconnect between the appreciation we have of beautiful spaces and our energy and motivation to save them needs addressing.
Group founder Anna Simmons was joined by over a dozen fellow group members taking part in the peaceful protest.
We need to cause disruption, and I hesitate to say that because it must be non-violent disruption. We must be brave enough to stand up against the tide of people telling us we're crazy, and with love in our hearts explain why we are disrupting things.
And there were mixed reactions to the sign, some people gracious, others angry.
And all we can do is say sorry, it's half a day. The consequences of not taking a photo, while important to you right today in the big picture, are not as important as getting off our apathy and getting on with it.
The group is part of the global Extinction Rebellion campaign founded last year in the United Kingdom and which recently made headlines for large protests in London. Simmons says urgent action is required to save scenic places like this.
We have an example out of America during World War II. They completely reversed their economy to muster energy and effort and resources towards the war effort. Now if we could do that towards planetary effort, we could kick this, we could solve it. But we've got to start now.
The sign remained in place until midday, with other events planned in the coming months. In Wanaka, the South Today.
The custodians of the Lawrence Chinese camp see a glittering future for the historic South Otago attraction. They're planning to establish a major cultural attraction and hospitality complex at the site by 2025 at a cost of $4.5 million.
Always a popular tourist attraction, the Lawrence Chinese camp is set to go to the next level. Custodians are planning to establish a major cultural attraction and hospitality complex at the site by 2025 at a cost of $4.5 million, but a long-term asset for the community.
To run the camp on a day-to-day basis, we'll need people from Lawrence and the greater area who are prepared to drive. We're looking at paid employees and volunteers, so we will become an employer.
She became chairwoman of the Lawrence Chinese Camp Charitable Trust only last year, but has arrived with a fierce determination to see the cultural, historic and archaeological site well equipped to enter a 3rd century and beyond.
We're looking at building a visitor centre out there. It'll sort of look like a big general store with big verandas, and we need that to service our customers when they come to visit the camp.
They're planning a 2-stage transformation for the 150-year-old camp, which will see its facilities expand dramatically. The first step is applying for money for a feasibility study.
A If that's successful, that'll take 4 months, and then end of this year into next we'll be applying for funding for the Heritage Architect and other consultants to prepare for the building of the visitor centre and for stage 1.
Shaw's own family history neatly illustrates the joint stakes in the camp's history, held by Chinese and Europeans alike.
The bar employed local ladies and employed my great-great-grandmother Grace Kerr before she met Chow Tai, and she became Grace Chow Tai. So employed local European woman.
The Trust also plans to reconstruct a small section of the original camp as part of Stage 1 activities, while Stage 2 includes plans for a restaurant, accommodation and further parking. In Lawrence, the South Today.
Organisers of the inaugural Textile Upcycling workshop in Dunedin are pleased with the number of people who came along to the event. It was to be held at the Otago Pioneer Women's Hall, but had to be moved to the Dunedin Public Art Gallery due to the large number of people who registered. Your mother may have once said, "A stitch in time saves 9." It's an old expression which may be inspiring a group of southern clothing upcyclers who met at the Dunedin Public Art Gallery today.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I couldn't have hoped for better. I was hoping there'd be a lot of people come along, and yep, they are, and it's very nice, and hopefully more after lunch too. So.
Organiser Kirsten Kosh is one of those at the forefront of a slow fashion movement, who says second-hand shopping for clothing to enhance at home is gaining momentum.
Yep, I think it's picking up. The idea is picking up. I think op shopping is becoming less embarrassing for people, and they're like, wow, yeah, that is actually better than what I can get at the new stores. So. Yeah, and I think people want to be proud of their creativity too and how they wear their clothes. So.
Upcycling is the process of taking something like clothing and repurposing it, or making it into something new and improved. Kinda like Clothing 2.0. It's familiar territory for Fiona Jenkin and Fiona Clements of Stitch Kitchen.
I'm here to present my work as being a zero waste practitioner, and also to support Kirsten in this great event that she's put on today.
And I think it's just a fantastic opportunity to come together as artists, as upcyclers, as people interested in the ethics and the history, the story, the culture around dress.
Among the 8 artists who showed their work are Elena Poletti, Keska Bazar, Kerry Mackay and Devi Liversage. The upcyclers also discussed their practice and displayed their creations, with organisers saying it may become an annual event. In Dunedin, the South Today. Still to come on Southern Newsweek, Anzac Day 2019 is remembered across the nation. We have highlights from around the South. And it's a case of hello pork pie as 60 minis arrive in Dunedin's Octagon recently. Thanks for staying with us. Anzac Day 2019 in the South was a bit different, but also the same as ever. It was different following the Christchurch mosque attacks, with armed police at the largest Anzac gatherings maintaining a discreet but vigilant guard. However, the core element of Anzac Day remained constant.
Several thousand people gathered at the Dunedin Cenotaph for Dawn Parade yesterday, marking the moment Australian and New Zealand troops landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula on April the 25th, 1915, a defining moment in the First World War, a conflict now a century old.
100 years ago, New Zealand marked the first peacetime Anzac Day. Across the country, people gathered to remember losses and experiences that were still war.
Air Force Group Captain Carl Nixon reflecting both on New Zealanders who died in overseas wars and on the New Zealanders who died in the recent Christchurch mosque attack.
As a nation, we are still grieving for those lost, for the suffering of families, and also from the knowledge that this kind of crime could happen in our world.
Anzac Day services were well attended throughout central Otago as well, including Cromwell ceremonies, which started with a service at the town cemetery. Between 600 and 700 people attended the dawn service on the Wanaka Lake shore, many reflecting on a very different time and a different attitude to war.
My old man put his age up 2 years to get across there. He was initially knocked back, walked around the block, came back 2 years older. It's his words. So it meant a lot. It means a lot. The society we live in today means a lot to be drawn completely on what these people do.
I think it's really important. It means a lot.
Kaitaia resident Raymond Dunn was the centre of attention in Queenstown, the 98-year-old providing the most poignant moments at the dawn service as he slowly but surely walked to gently lay his poppy in respect of his fallen comrades. The former Queenstown resident served in the Royal Australian Air Force as a wing commander between 1940 and 1945, the only one of his class in the Air Force to return. In Balclutha, more than 500 attended, the district's RSAs opting not to alter or cancel any Anzac Day plans in light of the recent Christchurch attack, despite anxieties leading to cancellations elsewhere in the country. More than 1,000 people turned up for the Anzac Dawn Parade at the Cenotaph in Invercargill, while in Oamaru around 500 gathered to pay their respects at the North Otago RSA Garden of Memories. The South Today.
The Pork Pie Charity Mini Run arrived in Dunedin recently, with vehicles parking up in the Octagon. The road trip raises money for KidsCan, and this year more than 60 vehicles made the trip from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South.
Rolling into Dunedin on their way to Invercargill, the annual Pork Pie Charity Run has attracted 60 teams this year, all doing their own fundraising for KidsCan. Some competitors bought their cars especially for the event, like this couple from the far north.
Oh, it's great. It's sort of exciting when you're raising the money, especially when you get some, and that you kind of build up a...
Well, every team does their own thing and their own way of fundraising, and when you look at your bank balance or the fund that you've raised, we've raised nearly $16,000 just us.
The event begins in Kaitaia and ends up in Invercargill, paying homage to classic Kiwi road trip film Goodbye Pork Pie. Starting in 2009, the event is held every 2 years, attracting people from around the globe.
Come from just out of London to be over here just to do this run. Always been a mini fan. My mother signed up for the run a year ago. She bought the Cooper to do it, and the person she had signed up to do it backed out, said no, that just wasn't for them. So my sister said she would underwrite my ticket over here if I came, so I watched Goodbye Pork Pie about 30 times.
Even engine problems like burnt valves and blown head gaskets hasn't stopped the road trip from going ahead. This custom Mini Mac needed a whole new gearbox in Whanganui to get its trailer load of kumara all the way to Invercargill. Competitors say it's all part of the experience.
Everybody gets in, helps each other, garages open up around the country and we get on with it.
The rally finished on Wednesday and has raised more than $250,000 for the KidsCan Charitable Trust. In Dunedin, the South Today.
That wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from across the Southern region, subscribe to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. See you again soon. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.